Hello, it's Michael Furlong from Rentrollmaximiser, and today we're going to work through the process of tracking our renter or tenant, documents, data entry, and the way in which we store all of the documents when we're doing or conducting an audit for the renter. So this particular task would be used either from a department manager, a team leader, maybe virtual assistants, and it would be used at maybe at the end of each month. You would go through and you would audit all of your properties. Or if you are potentially, if you're looking to sell the rent roll or have a look at the audit and risk management and compliance of a rent roll, you would undertake this for each of the renters that's inside the profile. So we're working inside of PropertyMe today, but this workflow, the checklist, could be used for Property Tree, could be used for Colmio, could be used for Our Property, could be used for any of the softwares. Now, if you're not able to use the checklist or the tasks, the items within the checklist, if you can't use those inside of your property management trust software, then of course you could go and create them inside of Trello, which is what we've done here. And we always start with the Trello boards in mind. So if I keep across, category 37 is where we have our PropertyMe workflows. And I've got all sorts of things inside of the Trello board, and this is mainly for property managers or department managers to help train their staff. So if I come across to category 37, I'm looking here into the property management workflows. If I have a look at number 3, this is the renter. Now, renters are in Victoria, that's what they're called. In other states, they're still called tenants. The audit of the current renter documents may be undertaken by a department manager as part of an ongoing property management file audit. It may also be part of a monthly KPI, key performance indicators. It may be part of performance management. It certainly would be if, as I said, you were looking to sell the rent roll and wanted to have a look at where is our compliance, where are our potential risks, almost like a little bit of a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The audit may also be done as part of an overhaul of the agency documents by a virtual team member when conducting a health check or operational due diligence. All renter documents should be saved in an external directory, like a Google Drive, a OneDrive, or a SharePoint. I'll show you that in a second. And only the most recent documents should be uploaded back into the renter property card, into the renter card in PropertyMe. It's important to ensure that the property and owner documents are saved against the owner and that all tenancy documents are uploaded to the renter card. Now, the reason for that is when you're archiving the tenant, what you need to make sure is any relevant documentation is sitting in against the renter card, both in the external drive, Google, SharePoint, OneDrive, plus inside of the property trust software, so that when you're archiving that particular tenant, all of the information is archived at the same time together. Any tenancy document that's saved in the owner section will not be archived correctly when the renter file is archived. As part of the renter card audit, ensure to update the labels as well. And also what we need to now do in Victoria is make sure that we are separating any personally identifiable information, such as pay slips, photo ID, passports, those sorts of things. And so they need to be saved 3 years post the end of the tenancy. So there's a little bit of an additional layer now inside of the archive. So we would use this as either an audit, or we would also use this to performance manage. My suggestion is, as soon as the renter is created, you would go and use this particular document if you haven't already used a renter setup workflow. And this particular workflow would be a really good one to go back in and then to use as an audit. Typically, if you're setting up a brand new renter, you would use the new renter workflow and you would have all this information anyway. This is really from an audit point of view once the renter has been checked. So the last time we've updated this particular document, I've been working on this, it was in February. I've got a couple of training videos here, and then this particular training video I'm doing now would sit inside of my Trello board. Now the Trello board is used really as a procedures manual. It's used as a operational guideline, operational procedures for the property management department. It gives you a framework to work within. It adds to the customer service because now everyone knows exactly what they need to do. It also helps with staff retention. It also helps with new staff onboarding. And the reason why I say that is because it makes it so much easier if you have a new employee to sit there and say, here's our training video, here's our process, these are the checklists that we follow. If you could watch this, then you can undertake the task. Watch the procedures video, the training video. If there's any issues or any questions, come back to me at the end. It helps with staff training. As I said, it helps with retention and onboarding. Now, typically the people that would be using this audit would be either a department manager, as I mentioned, team leader, maybe a director in a smaller office, but more importantly, it's probably a virtual assistant's task. And if you have a virtual assistant's team, then you would allocate this particular task to them. Okay, I'm going to read the description here because it's inside of the task already, but I'll read it from here. Conduct an internal renter document and file data entry audit on each existing renter in the portfolio as part of the agency's compliance procedures. After conducting the renter file audit, it was discovered that the following documents are missing from the Google Drive or PropertyMe, and or the following data entry requires attention. So we're looking at both the documentation that you have on file, but also we're looking at the way in which the data has been set up, the profile has been set up. So the renter profile has been set up inside of the trust software. Now, in this instance, it's PropertyMe, but it could be any of the other software as well. Step number 1, work through the full list of actions and delete any line item that's not applicable to this renter or this property, only leaving items that are specific to the renter and property, removing references to OC rules for standalone properties as an example. Now, inside of PropertyMe, there's a maximum capacity of 50 items inside of the checklist. And if I just come over to here, and if I come to the task, if I look at the templates, here we are over here, there's a maximum of 50 items. And what I'm doing currently is I'm just reading out this information. And my suggestion, and all of the information that I'm talking to you about now is sitting in here. So what I've done is, in addition to build out the workflow, I've also put in all the procedure or the steps in which the agent, virtual assistant, whoever it is that's completing this task. Now, it may also be multiple people over a period of time. This is not something which you would start and then complete in one sitting. It's something which you would build upon as you go through. But step 1 would be to click this particular item. It will change once you click this. It will change the, because there's an automation, it will change the status to in progress instead of to do. And then you would work through, and as I said, step 1, delete any of the items that are not applicable. So if, for example, there isn't a pet, then we would maybe come across here and delete that one. If we come down, the example that I've used here would be owners corporation rules. Now, if this is a standalone home, then there is almost, it's easy to follow the process and the thought process that there would not be an embedded network. So you can remove the information around embedded network. You could also remove the information with regards to owners corporation rules. So you would come down and you would delete that one. The move in, move out, not applicable, delete that one. And if, for example, it was an apartment block, then there's no reference and you did need those owners corporation rules tasks, then you would leave those in. But then you're probably going to remove, maybe you're going to remove the reference to insurances, for example, if that's in there. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work through that first of the items. Work through the existing documents on file to establish the valid, current and enforceable documents that can be used, and establish a list of documents that are invalid, missing, expired, old or unenforceable. So what we would do is we would come across, and we would look at, if I'm going to come to one of my properties, there isn't a task here, so I'll set one up. So if I come over to here, so it's 37.3, I'll add today's date. I'm just going to leave this at the moment. I'm going to save and open it. And so we'll work through here. As I said, if I click this, you'll notice that that changes. There we go. And if I was to come through, let's have a look at this particular property. So it does have, it's an apartment block, so I would need to have the owner's corporation information sitting inside of there. But if it was a standalone home, I probably wouldn't. So if I come back now to this property, and if I was to look at, now at the moment there isn't a renter, but if I was to go and I would have a look at the renter documents, they'd be sitting inside of there. Now we've got all of our photographs sitting there. I'd be sitting inside of there. So that's what we're looking for. So we're looking to make sure that the documents, whatever's sitting inside the file, we would be downloading those into the Google Drive. Now, where would we put those? So if I come over to here, the file setup, so each property has its own set folder structure, and you would just duplicate that into these subfolders. And so there are five subfolders here, and then there were 3 working folders. Now what I would do, these subfolders have, again, other folders inside of here. The objective here is that there is a subfolder for all documents, and we would be storing the information into those subfolders. But whilst we're working on the audit, it's easier just to go and download all of the owner documents into here and work through them. It's easier to go and download all the renter documents into here and work through them. So you would download all of your documents into these dumping folders, and once they're sitting inside of here, rename the templates, rename the documents, the PDFs, and then you can at a glance figure out what's there, what's not, work through your audit, and name the documents. If you've got a previous tenancy agreement from 4 years ago, then you would write old. If it's a current one, then you would put that in as compliant if it is compliant, or non-compliant if it's not. If you have disclosure statements, you've got 4 years worth of disclosure statements, you would have 3 of them would be old, and then you'd have 1 which would be named as compliant if it is, or non-compliant if it's not. And so what we're looking at is the 4 disclosure statements and the 4 rental agreements would be sitting inside of here for now. And then we would come back to our documents over here, and we would only have the most recent, so to be the current rental agreement, the current disclosure statement would sit inside of there. So we're not uploading 4 lots of documents to sift through. Hope that makes sense. And then at a later stage, once we've gone through and we've audited all these documents, then we can come into our tenancy folder and we can look through and we can say, okay, we have our internet ad, our application documents, our first rental agreement, bond documentation, ingoing condition report, key registers. Then we've got utilities, rent payment system, breaches, periodic inspections, any rent increases and CMAs would be saved there, lease renewals would be saved inside of here. So you'd have your initial agreement here, and if you've got 3 subsequent renewal agreements, they'd sit in this folder. Any pet request form, rent arrears strikes, renter transfer documents, vacate documents, and anything that's just general. And you can see by having a folder structure like this, it makes it so much easier at a glance to see what's there, what's not there. And if we went back to our paper checklist, we would be ticking those things off. Very, very easy, but we're using our audit here. And let's just say we've gone through, we've got a copy of the internet ad, we would click that one off. If we've got an application form for everyone over the age of 18, then we would click that one off, for example. And so we start to work through our audit, and as soon as we start to work through our audit, we come across here, we change out notch, so we go workflow, incomplete. And so we're changing the status of the workflow. We need to do that as part of our labels, but we're working through these tasks. Let's go back to it. Review the data entry to confirm the renter has been set up correctly, including bond information and renewal dates. Okay, so what I might do, because we don't have a renter in that particular document, in that dummy folder, I only have 4 properties in here. Let's come across here. We've got a tenant. Okay, so we have a tenant inside of here, and for a whole range of reasons as part of my demos, I've been using the audit. So let's just come back in through to here. We already have one of these set up. So I'll change the status. We've got our ads. We come over to here. We're now in WIP. You'll notice that this has started to come up as in progress. We're adding the tenant's details. Now this is a standalone home. So in this particular situation, the example that I use, owners corporation rules, not relevant. So delete that. Move in, move out guides, not relevant, delete that. Now we're deleting it in the task, not in the template. Very, very important. The only people who will have access to the template are those that have administrative permission status. Okay, so now we've got our information here. We'll start to work through this in a second. So what we're looking for, as I said here, is to review the data entry. And so I'm going to tick that one off. And so I'm coming over to here. I'm going back to the property, and I'm looking at the tenants. So if I move myself up here, we're looking at the data entry. Okay, so it's $710 per week. Now, don't worry necessarily about the dates, because this is just it's a demo site. But what we're looking for is the bond here. Okay, so the bond has a bond reference number. We also have the lodged date when the bond was lodged, and also the person that's filled that in. So wherever we're putting in data, if possible, try and allocate the person who's filled that in. So I've completed this on October 2025. The bond is sitting there. So we have a bond reference number, and we have a bond lodged with the RTBA. Don't worry about the fact that it's missing there. It's simply because it's a demo site. And so when we were to come back down to this particular task, I'm going to close that one off. Because I use this as a demo, they're in there a couple of times. So we're back here, and so we've got the printed ad. And what I'm making sure is that as we're ticking off these tasks, that we're saving the documents into the Google Drive. Now, we wouldn't be saving them inside of here now, because if we start saving them inside of these subfolders, we're in and out trying to find what we have, what we don't have. So what we would do is we're downloading everything into this document here until we have 15 or 20 documents, and we're at a stage where we've worked through our audit, and then from the audit we can then start to then pull these apart and put them into the subdocuments, into the subfolders, and then we would remove that one and only work inside of here. So we've got our property details, our registered owner, our current tenancy, any previous tenancies that would be sitting there. Now, typically you wouldn't have a current tenancy and a previous tenancy sitting inside the folder, because this previous tenancy would need to be archived. And so what would typically happen is if we have tenancy 1 and tenancy 2, and so where I would use this particular folder quite simply is if we had signed a rental agreement, had an application for a new tenancy in the last stages of an existing tenancy. So tenancy 1 is moving out at the end of the month. Tenancy 2 has signed a new rental agreement, application form, bond, midway through the month, and is going to move in when tenancy 1 moves out. And so what you're doing is, for a period of time, there's an overlap, and this is why you would use this. Otherwise, what would happen is, so current tenancy would be moved into here. Otherwise, what would happen is this archive tenancy would go into our archive folder for the 2026, 25, 26 financial year, and then we would have a destroy date 7 years from that. So I hope that makes sense. The general archive documents is anything that needs to be archived anything that needs to be archived, and sorry, anything that needs to be saved that's not in one of those folders. That's what that's for. Okay, moving back to our tasks. If you locate documents from a previous tenancy, then archive them in the appropriate year the tenancy ended or was lost. Only process current tenancy documents. Permanently delete personally identifiable documents from previous renters. Archive greater than 3 years. So this is really important. We need to make sure that we have, if we're going through the documents and we find that there was inside of the PropertyMe that there was a rental agreement or a condition report from 2 years ago, a previous tenancy, we need to remove that and then archive it into the correct space. So we need to create the correct folders. So that's important. When there is evidence of a document that's deemed current, compliant, valid, acceptable, and enforceable, check off the relevant VA task line, work through each item. And so we're back over to our workflow. Let's just say we've got a completed pet application form, then we would click that one. And missing, let's just say, for example, we don't have any references from the notes and agent notes from the application, and we're missing an employment reference check, so we don't have those. And agent notes showing feedback and timelines, recommendations for the rental provider. So we don't have those. And we're missing a database search. So what I would do is, if I'm working through here, maybe written confirmation that from the owner is missing as well. And so now what I'm doing, we've got the compliance disclosure statement. I'm now going to come over to here and create a note, and it would be always my initial, so 23/3/26, and then it would be MF audited files, missing reference notes, instructions. From the owner, missing NTD, National Tenancy Database search, missing employment references. Then I might add the property manager. Now I'm the only property manager in this dummy file, so I would add that in there so that it shows up on their notes next time, their tasks, and I'm adding that. And so now what we have, as I'm working through, I'm adding the notes. Now what I would typically do is to go through all of this, get to the stage where we've started to check things off. These are all good. And then I would also go back to the tenant and start to update their labels. So we're missing references, bond reference, missing tenant reference checks. We've just talked about that. And so what we're doing is we're now starting to build our labels inside of this particular tenant as we work through. Come back, and again, in this particular situation, I would work through the entire document as far as I could, the entire checklist as far as I could, and then I would build the one set of notes rather than going piece by piece by piece. Hope that makes sense. So what we're looking for is, as I said, we will work through all of this. Okay, confirm that all additional documents required as part of the tenancy agreement have been provided to the renter within the appropriate timelines. So what we're looking for is the red book. We're also looking for a disclosure statement. So we're coming across to here. Proof that the red book was provided to the renter prior to the lease. That's really important. We've got the evidence the property was compliant, rental minimum standards declaration and report, owner approved and signed CAV PET request forms if that's applicable, the bond receipt correctly naming each of the renters, bond receipt number and the date and the lodgement date in the renter card. That's where I was showing you before. If we come across to, we're saving this in here. Why is that important to save it in here? Because what we're looking for is we want to make sure that the bond was lodged within the time frame from the tenancy. So it needs to be 10 business days or 14 days maximum. So if we, for example, have lodged the bond 30 days after we received it, that's a breach. And then in that scenario, we would come across to here and we'd say breach, bond lodgement date issue. And so that's really important because we want to be able to, at any stage, check and audit the work that we're doing. Ensure that the renter's personally identifiable documents have been separated from the application documents to ensure they can be permanently deleted within 3 years after the tenancy. Really important. Rename all documents using the file naming process. So I have a file naming convention, and that's at the start of each document. It would be in capitals. It would be, for example, compliant, non-compliant, old, expired, invalid. And then we have the name of the document, and then what we would do is we'd have the address of the document and then the date. So file naming convention, remember we're going to save all of those inside of this renter folder, and by saving them inside of the renter folder we can then rename all of those documents. If we had 3 rental agreements, what you've got is you've got old, compliant or non-compliant. And so the dates would also, on the right hand side, you would have the first date maybe 3 years ago, then the next date 2 years ago, and then the last date, which is the current one. And so it's easy for me at a glance to be able to look. If I'm looking for something, I can go straight to the 3 documents and know exactly which one that I need to open. This is all about time management and making it easier for the property manager so they don't have to go over documents and keep opening things up. Download and remove any older documents from the PropertyMe and save them into the Google folder. Do not delete anything. Do not delete any of the documents at all. You're only saving them into you're removing them from the downloading them and deleting them from PropertyMe, but they're being saved in the Google file. You are not allowed to delete any documents from any communications. Everything must be saved. At each stage of the audit, upload and replace the most recent current documents to the renter card, visible to the owner, and remove previous versions from PropertyMe. Each version of the document is to be saved in an external rental folder. This is our external rental folder, and then over here we would have our documents. So we would have our bond application form, maybe our bond application, bond receipt, maybe our application form, maybe any reference notes inside of here. We would have maybe emails from us to the owner. Here is our recommendation, then an email from the owner back to us. Yes, go ahead. Then there'd be our ticker, NTD, and our ticker would be inside of there. All of our notes. Anything that's personally identifiable will be separated, and so it makes sense for us to be able to then just go and collate all of that information sitting inside of this folder. All of our rental agreements be sitting inside of there so that they can be archived easily. If a document is non-compliant invalid, then upload the document not visible to the owner. And so when we're uploading our documents here, we would have this either visible or not visible. So it's either hide from the owner or show the owner. So if there's a document that we know is non-compliant, maybe we would not show this to the owner. It'd still be loaded until we can get it rectified. Use the labels to reflect the current document status. As I said, missing, I showed you where the labels were. Always add detailed file and activity notes. I did that. And as we're working through inside of the audit, we're working and we're building out our notes inside of here as well. Printed PDF, and I would add the PDF into the Google folder. You may even want to upload it into here as well. Any high-risk issues identified as part of the audit should be noted as a separate note and include the property manager, team leader using the @ feature and their name. Now, you would remember I did that here where I used the @ feature. So you're just adding it into the property manager's property manager's name. So if it's a virtual assistant that's coming through, you can see where I've got PM task, PM, or VA task. So these are some of the things that the PM's required to do, then the rest of it's the VA's, some of the PM's tasks to do. Doesn't mean that that has to be done that way. If you don't have virtual assistants, then it would be all PM. If it's an admin person, maybe a reception, maybe a property management assistant, it might even be the property manager, it's all sitting inside of there. High risk task, close off any of the tasks on each line has been completed and checked, demonstrating that there's a valid compliant document in both the folders. So what you're looking for is you only checking these features off when you can prove and there's evidence to the fact. So if you're unsure, then you would leave that open so that the next time you come back to this particular task, you're able to go through and say, okay, well, we're missing these things. All right, so let's just work through our task. What do we have? So we've got our audit, so we tick off that one. PDF, I'm going to uncheck all of these as I work through. And so we've got missing needed, printed PDF of the rental listing and internet ad showing all advertising photos. I'm going to check these off as I go. Application form for each applicant over 18 with 100 points of colour photo ID, not blurred. Missing need, completed consumer affairs pet request form for each pet noted on the application. Written references from previous agents and agents' notes for each applicant over the age of 18. Employment reference check and verification notes and financial capacity for each applicant over the age of 18. Agents' notes and comments showing reference feedback, timelines and recommendations. Completed NTD or ticker, renter database search, if that's part of your fee schedule. Written confirmation communication from the owner approving the applicants. Copy of the current compliant rental disclosure statement, not more than 90 days old. Executed, valid and enforceable executed rental agreement or renewal. Evidence from each renter of a valid consent to service of electronic documents, and you would update your labels for that. Confirm the owner's names on the rental agreement, cross-check against the proof of ownership. Confirm the break lease fees have been stated in the rental agreement in dollars, not just the formula. Confirm the renter transfer fee in the rental agreement is the same as the owner's managing agency authority in dollars. Confirm the security bond and urgent repairs or amounts are the same as the owner's managing agency authority. Why is that important? Well, if there is a managing agency authority that is missing the bond amount, then the bond increases from $2,500 to $4,000. The problem is that many leases already say $2,500 as a standard figure. And if it's missing in the managing agency authority, it must be adjusted to $4,000 in the rental agreement. Reminders for smoke, gas, electric safety inspections set up correctly and compliant. And if we come across to the property, it's inside of here. Do we have our smoke, gas, electric, those sorts of things? Have we got our smoke compliance set up? Have we got our electric compliance set up? Working through. Next one, proof that the red book and the renter's guide was provided to the renter before the lease or the rental agreement. Evidence the disclosure statement was provided to the renter prior to the agreement, not attached to only. So my suggestion is that it's provided to the renter at the time where they're getting their congratulations email. Evidence the property was compliant. Rental minimum standards declaration and report so that you're okay to advertise the property. Owner approved and signed pet request form for each pet attached to the lease if applicable. If the pet application was done at the same time as the first rental agreement or the initial rental agreement as part of the application, get them to fill in a CAV request form as well. The bond receipt, correctly naming each of the renters. Bond receipt number and lodgement date in the renter card, yes. Valid and enforceable signed ingoing condition report on file, yes. Proof of the recent smoke, gas, electric, pool safety inspection dates were provided in their condition report. Ingoing condition report photographs, I save those separately, and I save those because we use them inside of here. And so you can see we've gone and taken all the photographs. It's really easy over time for us to build up a little library of the property, and I can tell at a glance if there's any issues. I can go back through to here and say, okay, well, that's the sort of door lock that we have. It's a 4-burner oven, has a dishwasher, has an overhead range. It looks like Bolt is the oven brand. Laundry, window, we've got our deadlocks here, heater, Vulcan heater, and now all of a sudden we're starting to build out the information. Makes it very easy for us to be able to transfer this knowledge across. If we've got the information sitting here, we've got heat lamps there. If we have the information, now at least we're able to start to transfer the knowledge from one agent to the next. Condition report photographs. Proof the smoke, gas, electric inspections reports are on file. Do we have a smoke, gas, electric? Are they compliant? Were there any known maintenance minimum standard safety recommendations? Evidence the renter was informed of any compliance breaches or recommendations as per the reports. Why is that important? Because if you have a non-compliant electric inspection report on file and then you fix up the recommendations, you still need to disclose those to the renter for the period of 2 years, even though that they've been rectified. So in the disclosure statement, you would say we have a non-compliant report on file, and the recommendations were these 3 items, 4 items, 5 items, and those items have now been rectified. Professional cleaning and steam cleaning receipts were provided to the renter correctly. If there's a signed key register, renter version of the ingoing condition report on file and recommendations. So this is where the renter has actually sent back their condition report. Now it's really important that we have a copy of the condition report back from the renter, and were there any issues noted and have they been addressed? Previous routine inspection reports with the agent notes and maintenance, follow up if applicable. Property attributes, key reference, next inspection and rent review date set up correctly. Again, we come back through to the property. Has all of this information been set up correctly? Is it a house? Is it 4 bedrooms, 2 car? Has it been set up correctly here? Is there an inspection there? Is there a key number here? Do we have the labels set up? If it's a strata, is there a strata manager set up there? Confirmation the owner was charged for the internet and or board as per the authority. If that is correct, confirmation the owner was charged correctly for recent letting or releasing. Confirmation the owner was charged for NTD, renter database. And so what we're doing is we're checking back through the statements or the ledger. Confirmation renters were asked for and provided a positive Google review, really important. And if that's the case, then come back over to here. So it's Google, renter gave positive Google review. And so we can start to track that our renters are giving us our Google reviews. There's labels for all of these tasks. Renters confirm contact card has been set up correctly with phone and email. Sorry, confirm renters contact details have been provided to OC manager if applicable and utility suppliers. Confirm that new tenancies, the first 3 month periodic inspection has been set up correctly. Confirm that the lease renewals, the next periodic inspection have been set up correctly. So we're coming back and we're checking our inspection dates, and we're also checking our rent review dates as well. Confirm rent review frequency is set to 12 months and set the reminder for 120 days prior to the end of the fixed term. Why 120 days? Well, because in Victoria we now have a 90-day notice, so we want to give ourselves at least 30 days prior to give us an opportunity to negotiate with the owner, liaise with the renter, and then send out the rent review and maybe a lease renewal prior to the 90-day fixed term. Update the labels in the property card to reflect the status of the tenancy. And then if we were to complete all of that, we would then close this off. And once we click that, it'll actually come across and it will mark to complete. So that's the way in which we, if we were to go through all of these items, what we've just covered there, that's the way in which we would audit this particular file. Now, as I said, all the documents would be sitting inside of here. The current ones will be uploaded to the property data, the property documents sitting inside the renter file, and our labels. So we'd have our labels updated. We would have our documents inside of here. And then what we would do is we'd go and start to move all of these into our tenancy folder inside of there. So hopefully that's helped you understand how we would audit a renter file for compliance. So what we're looking to do is to make sure that there is a consistent level of service, consistent level of compliance. There's a process to follow, and any of the documents that don't meet that, we need to then work to ensure that we have those on file to make sure we have a compliant property file. Thanks for that. Hope that has helped you.